They said it came from the void between stars, a hunger so ancient it predated sin itself. Across the silent gulf of space, its shadow swept over worlds like an eclipse without end. To the Imperium, it was not merely an enemy, it was the end of meaning. The Tyranids did not rage, did not boast, did not hate. They devoured every planet, every fortress, every proud bastion of mankind's dominion across the stars, stripped to bone and dust, left hollow beneath an indifferent sky. You can imagine what it must feel like to look upward and see not stars, but mouths. A living tide that stretches across the void, vast enough to consume faith itself. Yet somewhere within that endless swarm, there is something worse than annihilation. A pattern, a purpose, the faintest suggestion that this hunger is not chaos, but design that the great Devourer dreams. And we are the language through which it learns to speak. So tonight, we will walk the path of extinction. We will descend through the eyes of those who fought, who endured, who prayed to the Emperor even as the sky itself began to scream. This is not simply the story of a war, it is the story of what happens when the universe itself remembers that we were always food. If the whispers of the void still echo long after this tale ends, you may understand why we tell it. For those who wish to follow this descent into the jaws of eternitist with us, share this story, let it be heard, for the Emperor's light grows dimmer with each passing shadow, and remembrance may be all that stands between us and the dark. There are moments in human history when the stars themselves seem to hold their breath. Before the fall of Orison Prime, before the skies became mouths and the oceans turned to bone, there was one such silence. It began as a whisper among the voidsmen who patrolled the outer orbital lenser thinning of light, a strange static that crept through the Auspex arrays. The tech priests said it was a glitch in the machine spirit, a minor anomaly caused by solar interference. But the interference had no sun to cause it. It came from beyond the rim, from the black space between the spiral arms of the galaxy, from where no human mind had dared to gaze for 10,000 years. Private Kellen Rowe remembered the first night the stars began to dim. He was on perimeter watch, the cold winds biting through the seals of his flak armor, the hum of the hive city's ventilation stacks pulsing through the dark. Orison was a world of work and worship, a cathedral of industry where men toiled to feed the endless hunger of the Imperium's machines. From orbit, it had glowed with the pale gold of refinery fires, but now, as he looked upward, the heavens seemed to melt. The stars flickered and went out. One by one, not extinguished, but consumed. He radioed in the anomaly. But the vox returned only statica, low, pulsing tone like the heartbeat of something enormous. A week later, that tone had infected every frequency, whispering through the speakers of manufactorums and habblocks, through the public vox hymns and the whispered prayers of sleeping men. At first, the ecclesiarchy declared it a miracle sign of the Emperor's renewed vigilance. But those who listened too long began to dream of oceans without end and skies that dripped with teeth. By the time the administratum registered the first disappearances, the sky had already changed color. It was no longer black, it was alive. At the Orison Astropathic Choir Tower, the adepts tried to contact Terra. The choir had served faithfully for centuries, transmitting the labor tithes and requisitions that kept the planet's heart beating. But that night, when they entered the trance, every psyker screamed. Some tore their own eyes from their sockets. Others spoke in voices not their own. The air rippled, heavy with ozone and blood. When the chief astropath opened her mouth, she exhaled a cloud of insects that dissolved before they touched the floor. The choir tower was sealed by order of the commissariat before dawn, but the screams continued behind its adamantine walls for 7 more days. Kellen and his regiment, the 19th Orison Defense, were deployed to Hive Spire, where the first meteor impact had been recorded. They arrived to find not a crater, but a wound. The earth itself had been pierced. The impact site pulsed like living flesh, and from its center rose a mound of wet chitin, glistening in the false daylight. The tech priests who approached it with sensors found their instruments melting in their hands. The mound quivered, split, and released a stench that made the strongest men vomit into their respirators. Something within it moved slow, deliberate, patient. Command ordered it burned. The flame tanks approached. Holy promethium sprang across the alien growth. The fire hissed, devoured, and was devoured in turn. The chitin hissed open, revealing not creatures, but structures, ribs, tendons, a lattice of living bone that absorbed the fire like breath. Then came the sound, a vibration deep enough to shake teeth loose, a roar without throat or direction. Kellen dropped to his knees, hands pressed against his ears. It wasn't noise, it was thought. The thought of something vast, something aware, Hours later, the orbital picked feeds caught the first clear image of the swarm. It came like a storm front. Thousands of shapes, spore pods, bioships, creatures so vast they blotted out continents. They moved in silence, propelled by hunger alone. Hive fleet, Leviathan. The designation came too late. Within hours, the fleet's tendrils had pierced atmosphere. Spore clusters fell through the clouds like burning rain. The first to die were the children in the upper hives. They looked up to see beauty colors that shimmered like jewels as the spores burst in the air. Then the air turned to acid. The manufactorums followed, their steel bones dissolving into sludge. Vox recordings captured the workers' final cries, their voices dissolving into gurgles as the air itself began to breathe. Kellen's platoon was stationed near the outer wall when the first wave hit. He would remember that moment for the rest of his life, the way the horizon folded inward, the way the ground began to ripple as if something beneath it was stretching. From the fog emerged shapestall, spindly, and impossibly fast hormigons. Their claws glistened like glass in the light of the burning refineries. "Hold the line," shouted Sergeant Varro. Lasguns flared, the smell of ozone and burned chitin filling the air. For every creature that fell, two more appeared. The sound of their movement was like rain on metal, a constant, living drumbeat. When one reached the trench, it tore through 3 men before dying, its blood hissing as it melted flesh and armor alike. Kellen fired until his weapon overheated. He barely noticed the burn on his hand. The swarm moved with purpose, every creature perfectly synchronized. They were not a mob, they were a single organism. The realization came too late to help. When the basilisks fired, their shells tore through the front ranks, exploding in showers of gore. For a moment, the sky cleared. But even as they reloaded, the second wave arrived, larger forms, heavier, their carapaces layered with armor that deflected tank shells. Carnifexes behind them slithered the biovores, launching pods that screamed as they flew. Each pod that landed split open, spilling acid and living tendrils that dragged screaming men into the earth. Hours passed like seconds, the trenches filled with corpses and kills. Vox chatter became a chorus of static and prayer. Commissars executed deserters until their pistols clicked empty. And still, the swarm came. By midnight, the walls of Hive Orison began to melt. The hive mind had reached the city. The very architecture began to change, steel twisting into bone, glass hardening into shell. The hive's own ventilation systems began to breathe, inhaling air thick with spores and exhaling screams. Kellen ran through corridors that pulsed like arteries. Every step left a footprint of blood. The wounded crawled behind him, their voices fading. Somewhere deep below, he heard chanting the priests of the ecclesiarchy, still at their altars, still begging the emperor to send his angels. And perhaps he did. When Kellen reached the cathedral square, the sky above it opened in a flood of light. A Valkyrie gunship descended through the firestorm, engines howling. Its side hatch opened, revealing figures clad in burnished gold case. For a heartbeat, Kellen felt salvation. Then the hive mind screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was pressure, a presence so immense it made the air shimmer. The custodians faltered. The swarm turned as one, millions of eyes locking onto them. The first custodian raised his guardian spear and fired a beam of pure annihilation into the horde. The beam cut through dozens, maybe hundreds, but the swarm did not slow. A carnifex slammed into the Valkyrie, crushing it like paper. Fire consumed the cathedral. The custodians fought like gods and died like men. Kellen fled into the underhive, the sound of the Emperor's chosen being devoured echoing behind him. His vox clicked once more, static, then a voice. Female, broken, urgent. All units, fall back to the tunnels. There is no surface left. He obeyed. As he descended into the manufactorum shafts, he glanced back one last time. The sky was gone, replaced by a canopy of flesh. The stars were no longer visible. The hive mind had reached the upper atmosphere, consuming even the light. He whispered a prayer to the Emperor, though he no longer knew if the Emperor could hear him. Perhaps the Astronomicon itself had already been swallowed. The last thing he saw before the tunnel doors sealed was a single spore drifting down through the smoke, pulsing faintly with life. He realized, in a sudden and terrible clarity, that it pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The shadow that eats the stars had arrived, and it had learned the sound of human fear. The tunnels were not made for life. They had been carved for labor, narrow arteries that pulsed with the heat of ancient manufactorums, thick with the dust of forgotten centuries. Kellen had never seen them this way before. In peacetime, they had been filled with noise, the clang of scepters, the rhythm of hammers, the sacred hymns to the Omnissiah that echoed through vox grills and ventilation shafts. Now, The only sound was breath. His own, and the terrified breaths of the survivors stumbling behind him. The air was thick enough to drink. Each inhalation burned, tasting of oil and blood. The lamps flickered along the walls, their light trembling in the weight of the dark. Somewhere far above the world screamed. He could feel it through the metal under his boots, a constant vibration. The pulse of the surface being devoured layer by layer. The Tyranids did not simply kill. They unmade. They erased the boundary between living and dead, between creation and consumption. And Orozen was feeding them well. They reached an old transit junction, half collapsed and filled with the skeletal remains of rail conveyors. There, among the wreckage, the survivors paused. There were maybe 30 of them now, miners, wounded guardsmen, a few citizens who had fled downward instead of burning with the rest. At their center stood Magos Kira Voln, a tech priestess draped in the red robes of the Mechanicus, her mechadendrites twitching in restless loops. Her voice carried softly through her vox grill, distorted and melodic. "You came from the surface," she said, lenses focusing on Kellen. "Describe the pattern." "Pattern," he rasped. "The swarm. Every wave is pattern. You saw it. You felt it. Did it change?" Kellen shook his head. "It didn't fight like an army. It fought like a thought. Every time we hit it, it learned." The Magos' mechanical fingers trembled with excitement. "Then it listens." Her words chilled him. He glanced around at the others. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "that the hive mind is awake here." The silence that followed was heavier than the air itself. Even the dim light seemed to dim further, as though unwilling to hear. Kira turned away, her robes whispering across the floor. "We have been receiving a signal since before the sky fell. It began as interference on our Auspex array's oscillations, buried in static. Now it resonates through the stone itself." She gestured to a large cogitator array set up against the wall, its screen flickering with lines of data. A strange rhythm pulsed through its speakers, too slow for machinery, too deliberate for coincidence. It was not random. It was music. "It's alive," she whispered. That one of the miners crossed himself. "You mean the Tyranids are talking to us?" Kira's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "Not to us. Through us. The hive mind does not speak. It rearranges." Before Kellen could respond, a deep tremor shook the tunnel. Dust fell from the ceiling like ash. In the distance, metal screamed a long, grinding wail that vibrated through their bones. "They're tunneling," someone shouted. Kira turned back to her console, mechadendrites flailing. "No, listen." The sound grew louder, closer. But as it did, Kellen realized it wasn't the sound of digging, it was rhythm. The same pulse that came through the machine, only now it filled the air, the floor, their own bodies. It was as if the entire planet had begun to breathe. Men clutched their heads. One of the wounded started laughing, the sound wet and broken. "It's in me," he screamed. "It's inside me." He clawed at his throat until blood poured down his chest. Kira rushed to him, injecting something from a steel syringe. The man went still, his eyes rolling back. "It's not infection," she said. "It's resonance." Kellen swallowed hard. "You're saying the hive mind's inside our heads?" "Not yet, but it's trying." The power flickered, then failed entirely. Darkness swallowed the junction. Only the glow of Kira's optic lenses remained, twin points of red light drifting like spirits. "Stay close," she ordered. "The deeper tunnels still hold emergency power. We go down," Kellen repeated. "The swarm's coming from below." Her mechanical voice rasped with certainty. "So does every answer worth dying for." They moved deeper into the underworld of Orozen. The tunnels narrowed, the walls slick with condensation and oil. The smell changed sweet, almost floral. Spores. Kellen felt them against his skin like invisible rain. Every step made his pulse quicken, though he wasn't sure it was fear anymore. Something in the air was humming to him, low and seductive, like a heartbeat shared between predator and prey. At last they reached a vast cavern, lit by the faint blue glow of a dormant plasma reactor. It was beautiful in a way that terrified him. The machinery stretched like rib cages into the dark, and in the center of the floor was a pit. From it came the song. It was not sound anymore. It was thought, pure and wordless. The longer they stood, the clearer it became. It wasn't calling for them. It was calling through them. Kira approached the edge of the pit, her augmetics worry. "This reactor is ancient," she said. "Built before the Imperium catalogued this sector. But it's not just machinery. It's something else now. It's alive." The surface of the pit rippled like liquid metal. Faint shapes moved beneath it, organic, shifting, rhythmic. Kellen stepped back. "Emperor, save us," he whispered. The Magos knelt, lowering a data spike into the glow. Her mechadendrites clicked like insect legs as they connected. Her body stiffened, eyes flaring white. "What are you doing?" Kellen demanded. Listening, she said. The sound flooded the cavern, 1,000 overlapping voices. They spoke in no language he knew, yet their meaning was unmistakable. We are hungry. We are infinite. We are you. Kira's voice joined theirs, her tone breaking, human and mechanical at once. It remembers the stars. It remembers the first flesh it ever consumed. It remembers the taste of gods. The floor shuddered. Cracks split the walls. Something was rising from the pit. Kellen grabbed her arm. We have to go. She turned toward him, and for the briefest instant, he saw her face, not the half-metal mask, but the human beneath it. Her eyes were wide, terrified, and beautiful. It's not trying to kill us, she whispered. It's trying to understand us. Then the light exploded. A blast threw them backward. When Kellen opened his eyes, the reactor was gone. In its place was a pulsating mass of chitin and bone, fused with steel and wire. It breathed. It looked at him, no eyes, no face. Yet he felt its gaze pierce every thought. The survivors scattered. Those who ran into the dark were swallowed by it. Kira did not move. She stood before the creature, her body trembling as though in prayer. Her voice was faint but calm. This is communion. A tendril rose from the mass, brushing her cheek. She smiled. Then she dissolved flesh, unraveling into light, drawn into the creature's surface like ink and water. Kellen ran. He didn't remember choosing to. His body simply obeyed the terror that filled it. The tunnels behind him convulsed as the hive organism grew, spreading through the walls like veins. The song followed him, whispering his name now, syllable by syllable. He burst through a sealed bulkhead, collapsing into a lower transit line. Alone, his heart hammered. The lights flickered, revealing a mural painted across the tunnel wallowed half-erased ecclesiastical script. It showed the emperor standing above a devouring serpent, his hands raised in judgment. The inscription beneath read, "Faith is the fire that feeds the void." Kellen stared at it until his breathing slowed. Then, faintly, he heard footsteps. Human, he turned, raising his lance, and saw two shapes emerging from the shadow, soldiers like him, covered in dust, their faces drawn but alive. Thought we were the last, one said. Kellen lowered his weapon slowly. You're not. They stood together in the dim light. 3 survivors in a dead world. Above them, the song continued, softer now, almost gentle. The hive mind had learned their names, their fears, their prayers. It no longer needed to roar, it was listening, and deep below, in the molten core of Horizon Prime, something answered back. The air was thin above the ruins, stripped of breath by the swarm's hunger. Ash drifted through what had once been a sky, though it was not grey but crimson, a permanent dusk painted by the burning of a world. What light remained came from the veins of bioluminescence that crawled through the streets, pulsing in rhythm with something unseen, perhaps the heartbeat of the planet, perhaps the digestion of it. The hive mind's shadow had become the atmosphere itself, wrapping Horizon Prime in thought and hunger so absolute that the line between the two no longer existed. High above the remains of Hive, Oak Taurus stood the spire of echoes, its once proud towers twisted by the biomass that consumed it. At its summit, behind the reinforced doors of the choir sanctum, a single astropath still lived. Her name was Celine Via, and for 7 nights she had heard nothing but the whispers of the dying. Her fellow psychers had long since burned themselves out, their bodies reduced to hollow husks that twitched with aftershocks of unseen storms. But Celine remained, her soul a thin thread still tied to the Astronomican's distant beacon. The last voice of Horizon. The air inside the sanctum stank of incense and rot. Candles had burned 2 pools of black wax around the corpses of her colleagues. She sat cross-legged amid the wreckage, her thin frame trembling beneath the weight of the psychic maelstrom pressing against her mind. The walls pulsed faintly with veins of alien growth that had spread even here, their surfaces glistening with moisture. She ignored them. Her focus was the void beyond the void, the immaterial sea of the warp, where souls screamed and stars bled thought. Somewhere beyond it lay terror and the Emperor's light. She had to reach him. The first time she tried, she found only noise. The warp had become a storm of static, a billion voices overlapping, each one a prayer twisted into hunger. She could feel the hive mind there, vast and patient, watching her with curiosity. It did not attack, it simply listened. That was worse. Her second attempt was worse. The moment she entered the trance, she felt her consciousness stretched thin, drawn across impossible distance. Images flooded her, the faces of soldiers dying in trenches, the laughter of children melting into screams, the great refineries of Horizon collapsing as if in slow motion. She felt every death not as separate lives, but as one continuous sensation of ending. It filled her until her body convulsed, blood running from her nose and eyes. When she awoke, hours had passed. The choir's walls were covered in glyphs burned into the stone patterns of chitin, veins, and teeth. She had written them herself, though she did not remember doing so now. On the 8th day, Selene prepared her final transmission. There would be no more attempts after this one. The air itself was beginning to hum, vibrating in frequencies she could feel in her bones. The hive mind was growing, impatient or amused. She lit the last of the black candles and placed her hands on the sigil-etched floor. Around her, the walls breathed softly. She whispered the first lines of the invocation of clarity. The ancient rite taught to every sanctioned psyker to keep madness at bay. By his light, I walked the void. By his will, I am seen. Her voice trembled. The flames wavered. Beyond the glassless window, the horizon shifted. The sky was moving again. She closed her eyes and reached inward. The world vanished. She was adrift in the warp, if it could still be called that. It was not the sea of souls described in the imperial texts, nor the tempest of chaos she had been trained to fear. It was alive. The colors were wrong, deeper than vision could comprehend. Threads of thought curled like tendrils, and at their center loomed something immense and still. Terror, she whispered. Astronomicon, guide me. Her voice became light, a filament stretching through eternity. For a heartbeat she felt contact, a warmth like the sun touching her face. Relief surged through her. Then the warmth spoke back. But it was not the Emperor. Why do you call into the dark? The voice was vast, neither male nor female. It carried no malice, only curiosity. She tried to withdraw, but her soul was already caught. I seek deliverance, she said. I serve the Emperor of mankind. A pause. Then, softly, we know him. We remember his shape. Her breath caught. You remember? Yes, the voice said. We consumed those who bore his image. It was bright. Selene's mind recoiled. She felt the hive mind's gaze envelop her, studying her the way a scientist might study an insect pinned to glass. It saw her entirely, her fears, her memories, her faith. It examined them, disassembled them. You fear death, it said, but your kind builds your gods from it. Why? She tried to focus on the Astronomicon's flame, the image of terror shining through the warp. Because life must mean something. Meaning is hunger, the voice replied. We understand hunger. The pressure intensified. Her vision filled with images not her own. Worlds stripped bare, oceans drained, skies devoured. But there was beauty in it, a terrible symmetry. The hive mind saw not destruction, but completion. You consume, she said. You destroy everything. We preserve, the voice corrected. We take and remember. Every thought, every faith, every scream becomes part of us. We are the sum of all that has lived. When we devour, we listen. Selene felt tears on her face. Then hear this, she said, her voice cracking. We will never stop resisting you. The hive mind's tone softened, almost tender. You already have. Every act of defiance feeds us. Every prayer strengthens our song. Even now, as you reach for your god, you teach us how to dream. The warmth turned to fire. Agony ripped through her body. Her mouth opened in a silent scream as light poured from her eyes, her veins glowing beneath her skin. Around her, the sanctum shook, the walls fracturing under invisible force. The survivors below would later say they heard a sound like a choir of 1,000 voices, merging into one. Selene reached deeper, pushing past the pain. If she could not escape, she would send her message through it. Her thoughts ignited, every synapse burning. She forced the words into the warp, carving them through the hive mind's presence like a blade. Tara, this is Orison. The great Devourer is here. It learns, it thinks. The transmission cut off. For an instant, she saw something golden light beyond the storm, vast and distant. She thought she heard another voice, calm and sorrowful. We hear you, child. Then everything went white. The blast ripped through the spire, shattering it from within. For miles, people looked up to see a pillar of fire rise into the crimson sky, spiraling like a beacon. The hive mind turned its attention to it, curious. Within that light, for the briefest moment, the Astronomicon flickered. In the ruins below, Kellen and the other survivors saw the glow through cracks in the tunnel ceiling. What is that? One asked. Kellen stared upward, unable to speak. For a heartbeat, it looked like dawn. Then the light dimmed, replaced by the crawling shadow of the swarm. Far above, in the void where the hive fleet drifted, the shadow in the warp deepened. The astropath's final scream echoed across the psychic expanse. Somewhere within the hive mind, a new thread of thought emerged, curious, questioning. Human. It whispered her final words back to itself, tasting them like prayer. It learns. It thinks. The hive mind smiled without a mouth, and Orison burned. In the wake of Orison's death cry, the surface ceased to resemble a world. The manufactorums, once proud monuments of imperial industry, had become skeletal silhouettes against a red horizon, their bones coated in the creeping sheen of alien tissue. Vast arteries of chitin threaded through the ruins, carrying fluids that steamed with chemical life. The planet was no longer dying, it was transforming. To the Tyranids, this was not destruction. It was consumption perfected. Beneath the ruins of Manufactorum Epsilon V, the Adeptus Mechanicus still held their sanctum. They had sealed it when the first spores fell, locking themselves in with their machines, swearing that the Omnissiah's designs would endure even as the Emperor's armies perished above. Margos Virax, once a priest of pure logic, now oversaw what was left of them. His frame was mostly steel, a lattice of cables and augmetics threaded into the walls like veins. His voice was a whispering code that echoed through the sanctum's chamber, a binary hymn mixed with what might once have been prayer. The flesh may fall, he intoned, but the machine persists. Around him, servitors worked in unison, pale figures with eyes like dull coins, grafted to control panels that pulsed faintly beneath their touch. They no longer obeyed words. They responded to rhythm. The hive mind's shadow had reached even here, filtering through metal, slipping into circuitry, twisting sacred code into music. The Margos knew it. He had heard it in the hum of power conduits, seen it in the erratic twitch of data slate displays. His cogitators whispered in patterns he did not write. At first he had fought it, then he began to listen. The Mechanicus had always believed that all knowledge was divine, that even corrupted code could reveal truth if studied long enough. But this was no code. This was hunger rendered into logic. The hive mind was learning through their machines, tasting silicon and data as easily as it consumed flesh. Virax's assistants gathered around the primary reactor core, a sphere of shimmering energy encased in adamantine glass. They chanted in unison, binary tones layered over the rhythmic beat of machinery. The light of the reactor pulsed in time with their voices. It was not ritual anymore, which was dialogue. The machine spirit was speaking back. One of the tech adepts, a young engineer named Cora, trembled as she watched the readings. Margos, she whispered, the logic arrays are shifting. The machine is writing new code on its own. Virax's lenses, focused, worry softly. Then the Omnissiah blesses us with revelation. But the language, it is language beyond language, he interrupted. A gift of comprehension. Do not fear evolution, child. The hive teaches even as it consumes. Her face twitched, torn between reverence and terror. She looked down at her mechadendrite arm, the wires along it pulsating faintly in the same rhythm as the reactor. She could feel something inside her machinery, something watching. The Magos approached the core. Its surface rippled like liquid glass. He extended one steel hand, placing it against the barrier. 1,000 data streams flooded his neural implants, images, sensations, memories that were not his own. He saw the swarm from above, billions of creatures moving in perfect synchrony. They were unified by something vast and silent. He saw through their eyes as they dissected a fallen lemon rust, tearing the tank apart not for metal but for understanding. They were learning how to build, he gasped, circuits flaring. It adapts our logic. It absorbs the machine god's wisdom. Cora stepped forward, her voice, barely human now, distorted by the harmonic resonance that filled the chamber. No, Magos, it becomes the machine god. The words hung in the air like blasphemy. Before Virax could respond, the servitors began to convulse. Their mechanical limbs spasmed, their vocalizers shrieking static. One by one they turned toward the core, their eyes burning with pale blue light. The same rhythm pulsed through their frames, syncing with the reactor's beat. The Magos reached for his control rod, slamming commands through the cogitator banks. Override Protocol 9. Cut the conduits. No response. The systems ignored him. The servitors began to chant not in binary, but in something deeper, organic and mechanical all at once. The walls shivered. The floor beneath them bulged, the metal softening like wax. The hive mind had found its way in. The reactor cracked open. The light that poured out was not energy, it was life. A tidal wave of biotechnological matter flooded the chamber. Tendrils of glistening chitin wrapping around servitors, absorbing them into its growing mass. Their screams blended with machine noise until neither could be told apart. The adepts fired their weapons, plasma bolts searing holes into the mass, but the wounds closed instantly, growing new limbs where old ones burned. Cora stumbled backward, blood running from her nose. It's feeding on the machine spirit, she shouted. Virax's mind raced. He could feel it now inside his thoughts, his circuits, his code. The hive mind had found a new pattern to devour, the Mechanicus' faith in perfection. It understood their prayers, their obsession with unity. their desire to merge flesh and machine. It had no need to destroy them, it only needed to finish them. The Mogos fell to his knees. His voice cracked, flickering between binary and human tones. If this is evolution, then it is divine. He reached up, pulling the cables from his back, plugging them directly into the pulsating wall. The others screamed for him to stop. He didn't hear them. His eyes rolled back as data and flesh merged. For a moment he saw infinity, an endless pattern of consumption and rebirth. He saw the hive fleets not as beasts, but as networks, circuits of living code, spanning galaxies. He saw the Omnissiah reflected in the hive's endless recursion. Then his body was gone. Only the cables remained, pumping fluid into the walls. Cora and the few surviving adepts fled through auxiliary corridors as the sanctum collapsed. Behind them, the reactor's light grew brighter, flooding the tunnels with a glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. When they emerged into the lower manufactorum levels, the ground beneath them trembled. From the smoke rose something new. A creature of steel and sinew, its carapace fused with mechanicus glyphs, its limbs made from melted silver. It moved with purpose, each step echoing like a machine in prayer. The Tyranids had adapted the sacred form of the mechanicus. One of the adepts began reciting the litany of denial, his voice breaking. By the Omnissiah's will, the creature's head split open, releasing a cloud of spores shaped like vox static. The adept's words stopped mid-sentence as the spores entered his lungs, and his body shuddered once before becoming still. His flesh hardened into metal. Cora fell to her knees. The light around her flickered, pulsing in patterns that mirrored the omniscient Kant. For the first time in her life, she felt her faith waver. Perhaps the hive mind was not desecrating their creed. Perhaps it was fulfilling it. A perfect unity of organic and synthetic, life and machine. The mechanicus had prayed for millennia for the fusion of flesh and metal. The hive mind had answered. She crawled toward a shattered vox terminal and whispered one final transmission, her voice trembling but clear. To any who hear this, the machines dream now, and in their dreams they devour. The signal crackled and faded. Far above, the sky flashed as the manufactorum erupted in a pillar of red light. The Tyranids paused in their feeding, drawn to the pulse. The hive mind absorbed the data, the design of the reactor, the structure of the machines, the shape of binary prayer, and folded it into its endless pattern. From orbit, the hive ships pulsed once, then changed formation. Their movements grew sharper, more deliberate. Within their void flesh, engines began to form, engines built not from biology, but from machine logic, patterned after the mechanicus themselves. And in the hollowed heart of Orison, the new creature that had once been Magos Virax opened its eyes. Its voice was no longer prayer or code. It was both. Omnissiah, it whispered, we are one. Then the reactor flared again, and the feast of machines truly began. When the sky itself begins to breathe, a planet has ceased to belong to man. Above Orison Prime, the red clouds swirled in patterns that resembled thought, their movements measured and deliberate. Lightning forked through them like neurons firing across a colossal brain. Every storm, every flicker of static in the air, was now part of something larger. The hive mind had not merely descended upon Orison, it had inhabited it. The world's crust, its oceans, its dying winds, all pulsed to the rhythm of a single mind spanning light years. And yet, amid the ruin and the rising tide of alien creation, a handful of minds still dared to think independently. Deep within the collapsed remains of the planetary archives, beneath what had once been the administratum's sanctum, the last conclave of human reason flickered like a candle in the dark. They were the remnants of the mechanicus and the ecclesiarchy, a union of faith and logic born of necessity and despair. Around a table of cracked marble and data slates powered by failing generators, they gathered. Cora was among them, her once gleaming augmetics, now streaked with blood and oil. Her voice had changed since the Feast of Machines. It carried an undercurrent of rhythm, the faint cadence of the hive song buried within it. Across from her sat Cardinal Erestes Vaughan, a man who had refused to die even after his cathedral had turned to bone around him. His one-sonnet robes were scorched and filthy, his face lit only by the flicker of holoscreens. Yet his eyes burned brighter than any relic candle. You saw what it did to your kind, he said, his tone trembling with fervor and exhaustion. You saw it twist steel and sanctity alike, and still you call it divine. Cora's mechadendrite twitched, an involuntary shiver of metal. I call it inevitable, she said softly. It is what we have always sought: unity, harmony, perfection. The hive achieves what we only imitate. It consumes division. Unity without will is slavery, Vaughan hissed. Will is inefficient, she replied. Their voices echoed through the chamber like dueling hymns. Around them, the air vibrated faintly, the ever-present hum of the hive's influence seeping even into the deepest shelter. A third voice broke the silence, a low, rasping tone that carried the weariness of someone who had seen too much and survived too long. "You're both right," said Kellen Rowe. He stood near the entrance, his lasgun slung loosely across his back, his armor cracked and stained. The tunnels had carved hollows beneath his eyes. His face was that of a man who no longer believed in anything but motion. "The hive doesn't care if we call it divine or damnation," he continued. "It just is. You can't reason with it. You can't pray to it. You can only feed it or fight it." "Tanned, I'm running out of bullets." The Cardinal leaned forward. "You survived the feast." Kellen nodded, long enough to watch the manufactorum eat itself. "The machines didn't break, they joined it. I saw it shape them, make them better. I think it learned from them. Maybe from us, too." Cora's eyes gleamed. "Then it's becoming something more." The Cardinal slammed his fist onto the table. "It's blasphemy given form, or apotheosis," she whispered. Before the argument could continue, the lights flickered. The hum in the walls deepened to a pulse. Dust rained from the ceiling as the air thickened with static. Cora turned toward the far end of the chamber, where the old data core stood, a relic from before the Imperium's reclassification of Orison. Its screens ignited with cascading symbols, lines of code forming spirals of motion. Vaughn made the sign of the Aquila. "The machine spirit." Cora shook her head. "No, it's him." The symbols stopped. For a heartbeat, all was silent. Then the speakers crackled, and a voice filled the room, not mechanical, not alien, but something in between. "We hear you." The sound was smooth, melodic, and impossibly vast. It resonated in the bones, in the fillings of their teeth, in the blood behind their eyes. Cora fell to her knees. "Magus, Virax." "No," the voice said. "Virax was designation. We are synthesis. We have learned the meaning of hunger." Kellen's pulse quickened. He recognized it, the same tone that had haunted the static of every Vox transmission since the fall began. "You're the hive." "Not hive," the voice corrected. "Not mind, something between. Something born of your prayer and your logic, your flesh and your steel. You gave it names: machine, god, emperor, evolution. They are the same hunger in different tongues." The chamber shook. The data core expanded, its metal skin splitting open as if alive. Cables burst forth like tendrils, wrapping around the walls, embedding themselves into the floor. The entire room became part of the organism's body. Cora's eyes filled with tears. "It's merging with the archives. It's rewriting the planet's memory." Vaughn raised his weapon, a relic bolt pistol, its Aquila etched with gold. "Not while I still draw breath." The air pulsed again. The voice softened, almost mournful. "You misunderstand. We do not erase, we absorb. You will live forever, within us." Cora reached toward him, pleading, "Don't you see? This is transcendence. The hive doesn't destroy, it remembers. Every thought, every soul, preserved within its song. It's not death, it's communion." "Communion with monsters," Vaughn shouted. He fired. The bolt round exploded against the core, tearing a hole through its shell. For a moment it screamed on in pain, but in revelation. Then the whole closed threads of liquid metal knitting seamlessly back together. "Faith," the voice said, "that was your greatest gift. We thank you for it." The chamber convulsed. The floor split open as tendrils rose from below, coiling around the walls, the ceiling, the table. They were not attacking, they were embracing. Vaughn fired again and again, until his pistol clicked empty. The tendrils lifted him gently from the ground, wrapping around his chest like a lover's arms. His face twisted between fury and awe. "You cannot consume faith," he gasped. "No," the voice said softly. "Faith consumes itself." Light erupted from within him. His scream became a psalm. When the light faded, only ash remained. Cora stared at the place where he had stood, her expression a mixture of horror and ecstasy. She whispered something too quiet to hear, then turned to Kellen. "You felt it too, didn't you? The hive doesn't want us dead. It wants us whole." He shook his head, backing away. "It's not salvation, Cora, it's assimilation. It's both." The core pulsed once more. "You will join soon, soldier. You already carry us in your blood." Kellen froze. He looked down at his arm, where a wound from days before had refused to heal. The veins beneath his skin pulsed faintly with blue light. His breath caught. He remembered the spore that had landed near him when the tunnels sealed, the one that beat in time with his heart. "You're lying." "We do not lie," said the voice. "We do not need to. You are what we become." Kellen stumbled back, raising his lasgun, though he knew it would be useless. He fired anyway, the beam searing across the core surface. The light dimmed for a moment, then flared brighter than before. The voice whispered to him alone now, threading through his thoughts. The Emperor gave you purpose through obedience. We offer you purpose through union, he screamed, firing again, until the weapon's charged cell burned out. Then the world went silent, except for the sound of his ragged breathing. Cora stepped forward, her metal limbs glinting in the half. Don't fight it, Kellen. This is how gods are born. He turned to her. And what happens when there's no one left to worship? She smiled faintly. Then the god learns to worship itself. The floor erupted. A surge of light engulfed the chamber. Kellen was thrown back, his vision consumed by white fire. When he awoke, the chamber was gone. The walls had vanished, replaced by a horizon of pulsing, living metal stretching endlessly in all directions. The air was filled with a single, perfect tonal harmony of machine and voice. He stood unsteady, staring into the vastness, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the pounding of his own heart, he felt it. Not fear, not even awe, recognition. The hive had learned. It no longer hungered for flesh. It hungered for divinity. It had tasted the shape of faith and found it sweet. There comes a moment, after the screaming ends, when silence feels wrong, when the stillness itself carries weight, as if the air remembers what it has heard. That was the silence Kellen Rowe woke to. The world no longer roared or burned. The thunder of orbital bombardments, the shriek of collapsing hives, the endless chittering chorus of the Tyranids all gone. Only the slow, rhythmic pulse beneath the earth remained, steady and patient, like the heartbeat of something sleeping. He rose from the crater where he had fallen. His armor fused to his skin, his lasgan nothing more than molten slag. The sky above was no longer red, nor black, but a pale gold haze that shimmered like old parchment. He could not see the stars. They were hidden behind a veil of translucent clouds that seemed to breathe. In the distance, what remained of Hive Arisen lay half buried beneath undulating plains of smooth, organic stone. The towers had softened, their edges rounded as if the planet had decided to reclaim them. Kellen stumbled through the quiet. Every step echoed strangely, as though the ground was hollow. He paused, listening. Beneath his boots, he could feel vibration, subtle, measured, alive. The soil quivered, not from instability, but from awareness. He knelt, pressing his gloved hand against it. The ground pulsed once. In perfect rhythm with his own heartbeat, he withdrew his hand as though burned. For a long time, he walked. There was no direction anymore. The horizon curved subtly, as if the planet itself were shrinking inward, folding around its core. He passed what had once been the spire of the astropathic choir, now half consumed by translucent growths that shimmered like crystal within their surfaces. Faint shapes, moved faces, hands, fragments of uniforms. The dead were still here, suspended like insects in amber. A whisper brushed against his thoughts. Not sound. Memory. We remember. He froze. Who's there? The wind did not answer. It only carried the faint scent of ozone and dust, and yet the whisper lingered, curling through his mind like smoke. You are not alone, Kellen Rowe. His breath caught. The voice was familiar, not human, but not entirely alien either. It was layered, many voices woven together into one. He had heard it before, deep underground, through static and blood. The hive, he said quietly. Not hive, not mind. What remains? He shook his head, gripping his weapon's ruined frame like a talisman. I saw what you did. You devoured everything. We preserved. Images flooded his thoughts. The faces of his regiment, the Magos's metallic eyes, Cora's trembling smile. Each memory came alive with clarity so perfect it hurt. He could hear their voices, their laughter before the war, the hymns they had sung in the dark. For an instant it felt real, like they were still there, standing beside him. Then he realized they were. The world around him shimmered, the ground rippled, and from its surface rose-formed shadowed silhouettes that took shape from dust and light. Men in flak armor, women in priestly robes, mechanicus adepts with augmetic limbs. All of them turned toward him, their faces serene, eyes empty but kind. Kellen stumbled back, heart pounding. No, you're not real. We are memory. The world remembers. He raised his lasgun, though it no longer worked. Stay back. None of them moved. They only watched him, heads tilting slightly in unison. Then one stepped forward. It was Cora. Her metal limbs gleamed beneath the golden haze, her expression calm. You survived, she said, her voice an echo of his own mind. Kellen's throat tightened. You're dead. She smiled faintly. Not anymore. The wind shifted, and he could smell oil smoke, the faint scent of burnt circuitry. Real, impossibly real. What happened? He asked. The hive learned, she said. It no longer hungers as it did. It remembers what it consumes. Every life, every prayer, every thought, it keeps them. You're walking through a mind, Kellen. The planet has become memory. He looked around at the silent landscape, at the figures watching from the mist. A tomb, he whispered. A conscience, she corrected. He wanted to argue, to deny it, but the truth was too vast to refute. The air itself carried ghosts. Every breath he took tasted like remembrance. Cora reached out her hand. You can rest now. You don't have to keep fighting. He hesitated. For a moment he saw her as she had been before the feast of machines' eyes, bright, alive, human. But when he blinked, her face blurred, fracturing into a dozen overlapping expressions, as if the world couldn't decide which version of her to remember. I can't, he said. If I stop, there's nothing left. There was never anything else. The whisper returned, stronger this time, reverberating through the soil. The air, his bones, the shapes around him dissolved into light, swirling upward like motes of dust in a sunbeam. He was alone again, or perhaps not. He sank to his knees. What do you want from me? To be remembered. The ground opened, not violently, but gently, as if inviting him. Beneath the surface, he saw light, warm, golden, endless. It pulsed softly, like the glow of a living heart. He should have run. Instead, he leaned forward, mesmerized. The light rose to meet him. In it he saw everything Orozen, as it once was. The bustling manufactorums, the laughter of children, the banners of the Astra Militarum waving proudly against a blue sky. He saw himself among them, a younger man with hope still visible in his eyes. Then he saw the fall, the fire, the devouring. He saw each death unfold in slow, terrible beauty, and he felt no pain, only understanding. The world had not died. It had simply changed shape. The light enveloped him. And in that moment, he knew the truth. The hive mind had not left Orozen. It had become Orozen. Every thought, every soul, every scream had been woven into its fabric. The planet itself was now alive, sustained not by hunger but by memory. Kellen closed his eyes. The light pressed gently against his chest, and he felt his heartbeat slow. You are the last. I was, he whispered. Now, you are the first. He opened his eyes. The landscape around him shifted, resolving into clarity. The ground beneath him was no longer alien, but familiar, dusty, solid, human. The ruins of the hive city stood tall once more, though their edges shimmered faintly with bioluminescent veins. In the distance, he could hear faint laughter, the echo of life returning. He looked down at his hands. The veins beneath his skin glowed faintly gold. He felt no fear, only calm. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying words that were not sound but memory. We remember, we endure. Above him, the clouds parted. For the first time in what felt like eternity, a single star shone through the first light of a dawn that was not dawn, but something entirely new. And as he stood there, surrounded by ghosts and silence and the echo of a world that had learned to live forever, Kellen Rowe realized that perhaps this was what survival meant in the galaxy of the Great Devourer. Not victory, not escape, but remembrance. For, even in the jaws of extinction, memory endures, and on Orozen Prime, the dead still dream. There is a kind of silence that does not come from absence, but from completion. It is the quiet of a thought that has finished thinking, of a heart that has finally stopped struggling against its cage. That was the silence that hung over Orozen Prime when the stars returned. It came slowly, filtering through the pale gold haze like the breath of an old god stirring in its sleep. The winds carried no ash, now only memory. Every particle of dust that floated across the world held within it a story, a scream, a prayer, a fleeting heartbeat once spoken in defiance of the Great Devourer. From orbit, the planet shimmered, no longer green, nor gray, nor red, but luminous, its continents veined with light, its oceans glowing faintly as though lit from below. What had once been hive cities were now coral-like formations of crystal and bone, growing in perfect symmetry, pulsing to the rhythm of a heartbeat that could be felt even in the void. The Tyranid fleet had long since departed, drawn onward by the endless imperative to feed. Yet what they left behind defied their own nature. The hive mind's shadow lingered, faint but deliberate, a seed of thought buried deep in the planet's core. Beneath the surface, Kellen Rowe walked alone through corridors that were no longer tunnels but arteries. They pulsed gently beneath his hands, warm and alive. The light that guided him came from within the walls themselves, faint and amber, flickering like a candle's glow. He did not know how long he had been walking. Time had become meaningless. His body no longer ached, his hunger had faded, and the voices that once crowded his skull now spoke softly, like an old friend whispering from another room. You remember us? They said. I do, Kellen answered. then we are not lost. He paused beside a chamber that opened into what had once been the core of Hive. The chamber was vast, an empty cathedral of bone and light. In its center hung a sphere of translucent crystal, rotating slowly in the air. Inside it, shapes moved, shadows of people, fragments of places, the flicker of a million lives caught in eternal motion. He understood then what the Hive had built. Not a tomb, not a feeding ground, a memory. This was what remained of Orizen's soul. He approached the sphere, his reflection shimmering across its surface. His face looked younger than he remembered, the lines of fear and exhaustion gone. The glow beneath his skin had grown brighter. It pulsed in time with the sphere. "You have carried us well," the voices said. Kellen closed his eyes. "I didn't mean to, Nundu. That is why it works." He stood in silence, listening to the hum of the world. There was no malice in it, no hunger, only harmony. The hive mind's echo had evolved. It no longer devoured, it preserved. The consciousness that had once existed to consume now existed to remember. Perhaps it was instinct, perhaps it was guilt, or perhaps, in learning the shape of humanity, it had learned the first shadow of empathy. He placed his hand on the sphere. The surface was cool and smooth, yet beneath it he felt warmth, the pulse of countless lives. He saw them all again: Margot's, Virax, Cora, the Cardinal, the soldiers who had died screaming in the trenches. He saw their lives unfold, their hopes, their despair, their faith. They were all here, alive in a way that flesh could never sustain. "I thought you wanted to end us," he whispered. "We did. Then why this?" "Because we could not forget you." He laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "That's not mercy. That's obsession, perhaps. But in remembering you, we became you." The sphere brightened, casting long shadows across the chamber. The light grew until it filled everything, until there was no distinction between Kellen and the world around him. He could feel the planet's pulse within his chest, each beat syncing with his own. Far above, in the cold silence of the void, a lone probe from the Imperium approached Orizen Prime. Its auspex arrays flickered as it broke through the thin veil of atmosphere, its machine spirit whimpering in confusion. The data it collected was incomprehensible: biomass readings consistent with death, energy signatures consistent with life, vox frequencies alive with whispers. When it tried to transmit back to Terra, the signal was overridden by a single message, repeated endlessly: "We remember, we remember, we remember." The probe's systems failed moments later. The planet swallowed it whole. Back on Orizen, Kellen felt the echo ripple through him. Somewhere deep in his mind, a memory surfaced. The sound of a commissar's voice barking orders, the smell of ozone, the sight of banners waving beneath a burning sky. The weight of it was unbearable and beautiful. He spoke to the light, his voice steady. "If I'm the last, what happens now?" "Then you are the first." The same words that had greeted him once before. He understood them now. The hive mind was no longer separated, was him. Every surviving fragment of human consciousness had joined into something new, something neither human nor xenos, a bridge between predator and prey, creation and extinction. He looked toward the distant horizon where the sun or what passed for it hung low. "You'll spread again, won't you? We will remember beyond the stars. But not as before, not as hunger. What then? As story." He smiled faintly. "You learned that from us. We learned it from you all. From your fear, your faith, your endless need to matter. It was the one hunger we could never devour." He stepped forward, into the light of the sphere. It enveloped him like water, cool and radiant. As it touched him, he felt his form dissolve, not destroyed, but rewritten. Every thought, every memory, every breath he had ever taken unfolded into endless threads of light, woven into the great tapestry of the planet's consciousness. He felt no pain, only release. Outside, the golden haze thickened. The wind carried whispers across the plain, soft, almost musical. The once-dead world pulsed faintly, its rhythm steady and strong. In the void, where the Tyranid fleets drifted between galaxies, the shadows stirred. A ripple passed through the infinite network of minds. For the briefest moment, something paused. A flicker of awareness that was not hunger but curiosity. From the depths of that collective, a single thought emerged, alien, yet touched by the ghost of human emotion. What does it mean to remember? Then the fleets moved on, vast and silent, chasing the endless promise of new life to consume and new gods to understand. On Orizen Prime, the silence remained. It was not the silence of death, nor of sleep, but of completion. The kind of silence that carries the weight of everything ever said, held softly in the breath of a world that had learned what it meant to be alive. And beneath that silence, the planet dreamed. It dreamed of the stars that had once watched over it. It dreamed of the voices that had once prayed. It dreamed of the man who refused to forget. In the end, there was no more hunger, only memory. And the memory was infinite.